Hey guys, wanted to go through the NCAA options for you here really quick. Thought it might be easier with me explaining it than having to read a huge wall of text. The way I've wrapped my head around things so far, I think we have 4 options for the NCAA startup and drafting process. We can create 200 players at a time on my fantasy league. So we could create 200 devies there. There's going to be 4 copies of the devies for NCAA. And we could sell off all 4 copies of all 200 players and then cycle those. So we could do 400, 600, 800 players, however many it takes to get people happy with how many people they've got on their roster, and then just load them on Fantrax after the auction on my fantasy league. The second option would be to do 200 players, sell off 4 copies of them on my fantasy league, and then switch over to Fantrax and do a 90-team snake draft, essentially, which honestly sounds awful. Having 90 people per round is going to take forever. If we go that route, I would utilize a chess clock where each person gets, say, 24 hours on the clock. And if you take 15 minutes to make your first pick, that leaves you 23 hours and 45 minutes for the rest of your picks. Once you used up all 24 hours, then you would be on auto pick for the rest of the draft. To be honest with you, I think that's the worst possible option. Fantrax has a tendency when you set your draft picks to auto pick to just give you whoever scored the most points, which tends to be a whole mess of defensive backs because they all score about the same and they score pretty well. So that I don't like that option very much, but that's a second option. A third option would be to do 200 players on my fantasy league in the auction, sell all 4 copies, and then switch to Fantrax and do blind bid waiver runs. I did a whole startup this way in a league, and it actually works really cool on there. You can set it so that you see who has the high bid, but not how much they bid. So we could set a waiver run to run every, a couple days. And if we did this, because when we ran it just a 12-team league, we actually crashed the league through Fantrax. So many players claimed all at once, and we were submitting so many bids frantically when the processing time came through. So to try to limit how many you could win, I would say on any given waiver run, you can only win 5 players. And if you win more than 5 players, then you would have to cut the ones you decided not to keep, and that would be called a recruiting violation. Because if this was real life and you were running a college team and you were recruiting people, you could only talk to so many people very effectively in the course of 1 week. So I think that simulates real life pretty nice. I would just go through, hey, you won 6 players, which 2 do you want to cut? And it would be a really minor recruiting violation. Dock you a few points, give you the rest of the points back that you spent on all the players, and then do another round, a couple days, win 4 or 5 players the next time. I think that sounds like a lot of fun, would be a good way to do it. But doing it that way, people would need to use Fantrax. And I already know from 83, there's a lot of owners that just kind of let their college team go on autopilot and really don't use Fantrax at all. They don't do waivers, they don't look at their team. So there may be owners that aren't all that keen up in doing it that way. A lot of these, other than the snake draft that I hate, do have a problem with this auto draft feature. There wouldn't be a way for the people that kind of just want to do hands off on the Devi side to fill their team. I do have an idea for that. I'll talk about that at the end. The other option would be to do the entire thing on a Google spreadsheet. This would require me to do a lot of work with the formulas and stuff, but I could get it set up eventually to let everybody submit their best bid for a player. Try to find a way to hide it so that nobody else can see the high bid, maybe just the high bidder, like what Fantrax will do naturally. And then the way we'd have to do that is just have a cutoff the same way when waivers run, where any bids submitted after a certain point wouldn't be eligible anymore. I think that basically does the same thing that doing the blind bids on Fantrax would do, but it would be a lot more work for me to get set up in the first place. The only benefit would be the people who refuse to use Fantrax would be able to do the work on Google Sheets. So it's an option. It's not really something I want to do. If we do it, I would go all the way and probably put links to like the player photos and maybe their 24/7 profile for their recruiting page, stuff like that. So it would be fun, but it would be a lot of work. And I think honestly, just a combination of my fantasy league and the blind bidding on Fantrax is the best option. Those are our 4 options. The issues with needing teams to auto draft, fill the rest of their roster for all of these options other than the draft that would just take months and months to finish. If we did any of the other 3 options, a team could say, okay, I'm done. I don't want to do any more recruiting. I got my 5 or 6 big time studs, the top Devy names that I want. I don't really care who else fills my roster. I'm finished. That person would be number 1 in basically the waiver claim. They would have very first pick of the auto draft portion of things. A second team says, yep, me too, I'm done. 3, 4, 5. And we just go until everybody said they were done or filled their team from recruiting in the auction. The order all those people make that proclamation would be the order they get filled after our recruiting draft ends. And then I would go through all of those teams in that order. I'd record them as they go. We'd do it where it was timestamped so we could see exactly who did it in what order. And I would sort all the remaining players by points scored in the previous season. This would actually give them a better team of auto-drafted players because, like I said, when Fantrax does it in the draft, they tend to just give you a whole mess of the same position because they only sort based on points. I could sort based on points, but then also give you 5 or 6 quarterbacks, 7 or 8, 9, 10 running backs, whatever. Actually fill your team with quality depth that would be usable players that would not be just ending the draft with 30 defensive backs or something like Fantrax might stick you with. So I don't mind doing that work. I'd rather do that work, to be honest, of filling all the teams than the work of setting up the Google Sheet spreadsheet to set the whole draft up. So my preference would be either everything on my fantasy league and then just cycle the 200 players over and over, wait till a player has sold all 4 copies and then use that slot for another player and do that until everybody's full, or do 200 copies on my fantasy league and then switch over to do the blind bidding runs on Fantrax. Had a lot of fun in the startup league that we did that way. It was really intense because as the bidding went up to the time when the waivers were going to run, we were frantically upping our bids, trying to make sure we were the one that was on top. With this one, you would have that, but you also would have the mystery element where it only displays the top bidder. So you could be the 2nd, the 3rd, or the 4th and still win the guy. You don't have to be the top bidder to get a guy. So it'd be a lot of strategy that went in with that. I think it would be a lot of fun. But either of those 2 options are my personal pick, and I think they both simulate the recruiting process really well. And using the blind bid process on Fantrax would actually be replicable for the future seasons so that we could do all of our recruiting and stuff how it would be in real life on Fantrax. So my vote as commissioner is man up, cowboy up, face the challenge of using Fantrax. I know it's not perfect, but it's usable. Ask questions, figure out how to do the bids, and start on my fantasy league where people are comfortable, and then switch over to Fantrax and run the rest of the time there. I do want your feedback on things, so please let me know what your thoughts are. I think that's it. Thank you very much.